Now, this is an exciting, really exciting bit of today. This is when we present the Corkill Winners Awards, plural, please note. This year, there were 3 award winners, a first, a runner-up, and a highly commended. And the highly commended is not here today. I'm going to read out a little bit about the winner, and then I'm going to ask the winner to come up, and we're going to ask Kim Tolley from the GMC to present the prize, and she's sitting down here. Now, the whole object of the Corkill Award is that people can do something that other groups can imagine how to do it. They can replicate it. They can think, well, this is a good idea. We could try that. Or they may be doing something in very difficult circumstances. Or it may be something that seems stark staring obvious, but in fact, it's not so easy to do. And this is where the winners, which were Ashley Medical Practice, which is in Ashted. I'm right, haven't I? Ashted's in Surrey, I think. Right. What this marvellous group did, they followed the patient complaints about the choice of hospital for eye appointments. Now, that may seem a very simple thing to do, but in fact, most of the patients were older people, and they were being referred to a hospital a good bit further away with no public transport. Problem number 1. So they got this changed. It's quite a long story, but they managed to get it changed, so now the patients can go to somewhere that's much more convenient. They worked with the practice, which resulted in important improvements in the appointment system. Now, lots of PPGs do this, but it may be worth asking Ashley how they did it. They provided a medium for the patients to express their views and know that these will be listened to, and the improvement in the arrangements for patients who suffer from autism. I think this is just superb. There was a lot more, but perhaps the winners will tell you about it. I would like them to come up and tell us about the work. 5 minutes, and then we'll ask him to present the prizes. Please.
I could talk about PPGs and what we've been doing for ages, and I've got to try and limit it to 5 minutes, so I'll be fairly quick and to the point. I tried to identify some of the reasons why I think it's worked pretty well for us. One of the reasons was in contradiction to what I heard this morning. When we drew up our constitution, we deliberately decided to leave out the words critical friend, because we felt the word critical was already putting a barrier between us and the practice. We actually focused our terms of reference much more on making positive and practical, real changes and benefits which we could quantify. The other thing I think, which at an early stage we all decided we didn't want just to finish up being a talking shop that met 2 or 3 times a year and didn't achieve anything. And so we decided that we would operate very much by identifying projects, setting up working groups, small working groups, and using the monthly committee meeting very much as a control, as a board to run the work that we were doing. So the board would sort of agree, the committee would sort of agree the projects, agree the members, agree the terms of reference, but the individuals would then go away at their own pace, at their own time, the way they wanted to. They'd work at the projects, report back to the monthly team meeting, committee meeting, and we would then add some more information to them, help them, guidance, maybe point them in a different direction. But we found this was worked very well. We never run more than about 2 or 3 projects at any one time because it's just too much. But it has worked, and I think it's enabled everybody on the team to get involved in their own way, in their own time, and feel that they've actually achieved something. Very quickly running through some of the other things we've achieved, we took over from what we tried to do is, initially we met with a lot of sort of antagonism by the practice, suspicion, what have you. So we took the approach, we've got to win them over. And the only way we'd win them over is actually proving that we can do things to help them. And one of the things we took on at the early stage was this autism project, which we worked with the practice. We persuaded one of the doctors to work with us. We needed the doctor to write to the patients concerned for data protection and confidentiality issues. But from that, we actually adopted a different approach to how the practice dealt with autism patients. And we also produced a guide sort of indicating where the local support services were, and also set up a self-help group for the autism patients. One of the other things that we did, we took over from the practice, was the production of their newsletter. I think it appeared once every 3 years on a scrappy piece of A4 paper. We now have a 12-page version. What we've tried to do is both educate and inform about health issues, what the PPG is doing, and also what the practice is trying to do. For example, on this one, I'll very quickly run through. The front page is all about health and well-being, helping your GP to help you. We've got inside, we've got an article from a local pharmacist saying how he can help. We move on to an article on back pain. We've got something on family planning clinics. In the middle, we decided to take photocopies of what's on the notice board, because nobody looks at notice boards, do they? So these pictures here are pictures of what's actually on the notice board. We have a did you know thing where we announce as brief as we can. For example, Ashton has its first public access defibrillator, information about that, information about out-of-hour services to GPs, etc. And an article on bereavement. But also, within there, we got local advertising. So this 12-page booklet, which we produce twice a year, we actually make a slight profit on, about 100 quid on each issue. And we now circulate, we now run to, I should have said earlier on, our practice has about 20,000 patients. We now produce, we have a circulation of 3,500 for this, and we've enrolled the help of the local chemists, the local opticians, what have you, I can't remember, pharmacies, thank you, I'm being prompted, don't worry, the various local outlets, so that they can give it to people as they come in. Because we were aware, if it's just distributed by the practice, the only people who ever see it will be the people who go to the practice. And there's a large number of people that don't go to the practice. So we've made a conscious effort of trying to get it circulated to various people. We also have a team, a very small team. We actually push one or two through people's letterboxes. Various people on the committee have taken on particular roads, and they'll deliver certain ones. So we've tried to distribute it. I'll be as quick as I can. The other thing we've done, which the doctors have found very useful, this is sort of a signposting for local services, a little leaflet. The doctors themselves said that they, when they're speaking to patients, they really didn't know what was available locally. And so we took on the project. When we thought, oh, this is going to be enormous, we're going to produce a volume. But actually, when you research it, there's an awful lot on the net. And what was required was just a signposting of the main headings. For example, in Surrey Information Point actually covers a wealth of other local sites. So what we've done is produce something that just directs patients and doctors to just a small number of contact points. And in this, we reckon we've covered most of the local services. I won't go on. I could, because we've done one or two other things as well. But I think that gives you a flavour of the practical things that we've tried to do. I would summarise by saying that, we now have a very, very good working relationship with the practice. But that has had to be earned, not by me, but by the team that I've had around me. And really, you know, this award is very much for all the efforts of the people who've worked on the team, which over the period of time has been about 12, 15 people. So on behalf of them, it's really, the award is for the people who work with me. Thank you very much. I have brought some spare copies of this, if anybody would like to take a copy. They're being waved in the air on my table over there.
Don't go away. Just I introduce Kim Tolley from the GMC. Kim is a nurse teacher, but far more important in a way, she's a chairman of a PPG. Thank you for...
Can I just say thank you very much. The GMC, Patricia's thanked the GMC for sponsoring, but the GMC is a patient organisation. You know, we work for patients. So I've been really privileged to be here today and also to sponsor the event. Just on your tables, there's a patient's guide, what to expect from your doctor, that the GMC produced. I just left one on your table. They're available from our website. You can order lots and lots for your waiting rooms. Good medical practice is what doctors sort of use to underpin everything they do. And also Patients Help really is a guide for patients who want to make complaints. I've put lots of those on your tables. I thought they might be really useful. But for me, the conference has been amazing about sharing ideas. And I've written down many things that I'm going to take away. And I'd love one of those booklets for my own patient participation group. And I'd also like to thank you for being volunteers. Because actually we're all volunteers here, aren't we? And I actually think being a volunteer is an amazing privilege. I've certainly loved being a volunteer for my PPG, but I think, you know, you're all doing stuff voluntarily, which is pretty amazing. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you very much. Brilliant. Well done.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Oh my God, we're going to have a picture.
Oh.
You need to hold it up.
Yes, I will.
You need to hold it up.
Okay. Number 2, the runners-up. This is Bassett Road Surgery, which is in Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire. Now, they have done some fascinating work. It's quite difficult to judge and give a 1 and a 2 and a 3. But a runner-up is pretty good, I think, very good. What they have done, and they'll tell you more about it themselves, they've refined a range of appointments so that this suits different populations. They've established a weekly Walk for Health group with 3 levels of ability. I think that's marvellous. They've participated in all the Bassett Road Surgery staff appointment systems, and that seems very good. They've established a meet and greet group. They've designed and managed an annual patient survey, and they've raised awareness of the PPG role by doing a survey of the staff in the surgery. Now that's an innovation if there's not one. So may I ask, please, the Bassett Road Surgery to come up and tell us about their work.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm Edith Griffith. I chair the Bassett Road PPG. Can I just say well done to Ashley? Congratulations. That sounded absolutely fascinating. And we'll be taking lots of your ideas home with us today, as well as ideas that we've picked up along the way from lots and lots of you people here. Thank you to NAPP. We at Bassett Road, Leighton Buzzard, are delighted to accept this award. Our practice has around 14,500 patients. It's one of 3 in our town, which was originally, when I moved to the town 40 odd years ago, was a small market town. Now it's pretty big. It's a commuting town, lots and lots and lots of young families, and different people, different jobs, you name it. I think we've got it in Leighton Buzzard. The only thing we haven't got in Leighton Buzzard is a hospital. So the PPG is very, very important, and each one of the PPGs does have, each one of the practices does have a PPG. I chair a PPG with a core working group of absolutely wonderful people. I have to tell you, they're absolutely fantastic. Fortunately for us, Bassett Road was and is increasingly committed to patient-centred care. Yes, I think we've had to work on some members of staff, but it's got an amazing deputy practice manager who's actually here with us. Sue is here with us today, and she's been absolutely fantastic, along with 2 of our younger GPs who've really supported and enabled us as a PPG over the last 5 years. We've worked very, very closely and very hard together. We involve all staff members, as you heard, as far as possible. Many come to our meetings, and theirs is always the first agenda item on our agenda. And it's a 2-way sharing process. So if we want them to answer particular questions, we let them know in advance. But if not, we share information with the staff, and we get lots of members of staff, some on a very regular basis, as with our 2 GPs and as with Sue, definitely, who's also our secretary, not our minutes secretary, but our secretary. But some come in and out, and new staff come as well to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves. After that first agenda item, they're free to leave. They know that they can go after that, but they can stay on as well if they choose to, and that's worked really, really well. Our brief, as is everybody's brief, I guess, in the PPG, is to listen and respond to our patient body and to the practice, and to liaise between them. And in order so that we further maintain and improve what's on offer, what services we have. We work together, as you all do, to get things done. We've achieved several things, some of which have already been told to you. The patient appointment system is an interesting one. The surgery was already working on it, but we've added our bit to it as well, and it better suits our patient body. I or my deputy chair sit on all staff appointment panels with the practice manager, the GPs, whoever's involved. We sit and we take a full part in that. And because we needed to reflect the patient voice, and we needed more patient-centred people to be appointed to the practice, and that's what we get. We hold and report back on regular meet and greet sessions in the waiting room, where PPG members can chat with patients, and where many concerns are brought up and they're actually resolved there and then. So the PPG member will go to Sue or whoever and say, look, there's a slight issue here, can you deal with it? And they come out and they deal with it there and then. So there's lots of things like that that go on. And from this, and from our analysing of our annual patient survey, we draw together and monitor a comprehensive action plan for our surgery, for our practice to use as a development guide. And they report back on this at every meeting. We don't have quite such regular meetings as Ashley. We have them every 2 or 3 months, but we have lots of working party meetings in between. We've also established a thriving Monday morning walk for health with trained leaders, and we've joined with the national Walking for Health movement for that. 3 different levels so that people can get back into walking or can take up walking after an illness or whatever. And it's impacting very, very positively on physical, mental, social and emotional health, all kinds of health. We've got some lovely stories of people who've been new to the town, made friends, a person with agoraphobia who wouldn't come out of his house at all, and he's come out and he joins us and he walks, and all sorts of lovely stories like that. And apart from that, we've driven various ideas through our network of 3 practices. So they have a PPG network in the town. The chairs don't necessarily sit on the network. We have 2 or 3 volunteers off the PPG. Margaret is one of ours. And for example, we suggested to them that they look at transport, because getting to hospital was an absolute nightmare for lots of our vulnerable and elderly. And so they took that up because it was a whole town venture. More recently, our focus has been very, very much on the elderly, who form almost 20% of our patient body. And I'll now hand over to Margaret, one of our wonderful PPG people, to tell you what exactly she spearheaded us to do for them, and also to accept the award on our behalf. Thank you, Margaret.
I need to put my glasses on, which shows I'm one of the 20%, I think. What we did was to produce a booklet of information for people living locally, for the older people. This is the original one. Information for older people, Leighton Buzzard area, and I won't tell you what's in it because it would take too long, and I've only got 90 seconds.
A few seconds more.
Now, there is one other booklet which I'd like to show you because this is really special. Our team of 5 voted against my suggestion that we should have all 4,000 copies with a hole in the corner so you could hang it up. They wouldn't let me do it. But they kindly indulged me with this one, even making me the little bit of string to hang it up by. And it hangs up by my phone in the kitchen, and very useful it is. Then I've also brought with me the first draft of the update. This is the sort of horrible mess it's in to start with. And we have our meetings planned for that, and we hope to print that in January next year. The previous one was January 2016, so about every second year we definitely need to update it because things change. We produced the booklet as a contribution to the locality network PPG group project, which aimed to support and improve services for the district's elderly and vulnerable. And copies were distributed chiefly via the town's 4 GP practices, as there were then, and now 3, as you heard. Also through appropriate charities and public services, such as the Volunteer Centre, the library, the U3A group, which has over 700 members, and take them for their friends and isolated people they know, and some to the rural village organisations. A special one-off town council grant paid for the printing the first time. Other expenses were borne by the team members. I'm very disappointed that the other team members are unable, because of caring and other responsibilities, not to be here today to receive this recognition of their work. But we're pleased that Sue Elliott, our Deputy Practice Manager, who's been a wonderful support as the PPG developed, is here, as you've just heard. We all learned a great deal, especially someone called Janet Cosby, who has perforce become impressively computer skilled. And the document, thanks to her, is on the Bassett Road Surgery website, if people would like to read it. Thank you very much on behalf of the team members for this encouragement, and for choosing June the 24th as my 87th birthday. which is certainly going to make it a memorable one. Thank you. I've got yours.
Happy birthday, dear Margaret. Happy birthday to you.
Gosh, it's a choir.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. You've got to hold it like that.
Oh, right.
You can hold it like that.
Oh, gosh. Let me put those down, including the glasses. Got to smile though.
Birthday smile. Should you have a cake?
Wasn't that inspirational? Absolutely super. And thank you, Kim, for presenting these prizes. It's now time for our patron, Sir Denis Pereira Gray, to do a summing up. I think this is the next bit of our conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I'd just like to make a note that we have in the conference today Dr. Tim Payne, who is representing a Bristol PPG. I happen to know Tim, he's an old colleague and I had the pleasure of working with him, but it's really important that all of us know that he was the central founder of NAPP. And it's wonderful that he's here 39 years later, and we very much hope he'll be with us when we celebrate our 40th anniversary next year. The trustees have really twisted my arm to do this. It's always a chancy business doing a attempted summary of a conference as dynamic as this one, and they've asked me to throw in a few personal thoughts if I can. So this is a high-risk talk, so forgive me if it goes wrong. We started with Professor Hungin as president of the BMA, who gave a background of talking about paradigm shifts, which is the label that's given to when thinking changes suddenly and people see the world in different ways. And I think we've had a very dramatic paradigm shift in our lifetime with the internet and the access to information, and he made that point extremely well. He also told us about big changes in the medical profession, a whole string of them, much more burnout than there ever used to be, and an extraordinary decision by this generation of junior doctors, half of whom have decided not to pursue specialist training, a figure that's never been seen before. To some extent, of course, that's a scar from the terrible doctors' strike, which they lost, and to some extent it's, I think, a generational change of thinking about the future of their lives. He mentioned continuity of care, and he was gloomy about it. He mentioned places where it's broken down, in North Wales, for example, and to some extent in the north of England, and he questioned its future, and I will come back to that. And he gave us some horrible stories about what patients in China can do to doctors who get it wrong. Interestingly, he drew the famous Don Berwick triad. Don Berwick is one of the leading analysts in the United States who I've had the pleasure of meeting there. And the essence is that era 3 is what Berwick is predicting will be about doctors becoming more concerned about hearing the patient's voice. That is the central prediction of Don Berwick, and I happen to agree with it. So he finished by raising the question of whether it's going to be possible for general practitioners in the future to give interpersonal support, and he left us with a serious question mark, and I think a tilt towards his view that it probably won't be. And over lunch, I heard 3 members of this conference say they found that depressing, so I will try to respond to it at the end. Our second speaker was Ruth Rankin, who is in the very senior position of Deputy Inspector for General Practice and the Care Quality Commission, CQC. And she summarised the fact she's got 50,000 providers to categorise, and the 4 categories are outstanding, good, room for improvement, or inadequate. And everybody goes into one of those 4 boxes. The parameters on which the assessment is made is safety, effectiveness, caring, yes or no, responsive, yes or no, and is the organisation well led? And that applies to hospitals as well as to general practice. She saw this central issue in general practice as being leadership. And that may be an issue for us in PPGs to think, because it's not the immediate first thought that PPGs have about practice, where how well is it being led? And she then described really quite a number of the developments of the CQC and filled out its hugely important role, and they've now been round to virtually every general practice in the country. So she's got figures, and the crucial summary for us was that 4% have been graded outstanding, 85% have been good, 10% have been in room for improvement, and 1% have been inadequate, some of which she has closed. So that was a very thought-provoking and very helpful overview of the inspection system in general practice at the moment. We then had a soapbox, which, and I've been at several of these conferences, I don't think I've ever heard more, and I don't think I've ever heard a wider variety of suggestions, and they just poured out on all aspects, and I think they really are worth capturing. They were preceded by a talk from our chief executive, who made a real plea for 100 groups to volunteer to be a consulting group for NAPP. I think that's a marvellous organisational idea. It makes NAPP's position in responding to queries much better. And I do hope that all of you in PPGs will take that home and do your best to see if your group can volunteer. Among the soapbox proposals were really much more consultation among your own members. That was emphasised. There was serious concern about how far STPs were consulting or not consulting, or whether they were being listened to. Some PPGs feeling ignored. There was a strong plea about customer satisfaction, which is the patient on our model, and a feeling that the voice wasn't loud enough and needed to be heard more loudly. There were queries about using the practice database, and the key bit of legislation for you is the Data Protection Act of 1998, which is binding on general practitioners. They have no choice. It is a legal requirement to observe it. So anybody who wishes to access databases need to be fully familiar with that act. And then we had, and I express a bias here because I was a little bit involved and wrote the preface to the report from Cornwall, where they did a study on the very special problems that rural patients experience, which are certainly not experienced in cities, got it sorted out, published, and brought the booklet along to us. So for me, that was a highlight among the soapbox presentations. We had a string of Maggies. I don't know if that's coincidence or not, but the theme of that, a lot of them, was about health and well-being, about the idea of moving upstream away from the end result of medicalisation, but to try and help people to be more healthy and prevent some of the problems down the road. From one of our former chief executives, Roger Batty, who incidentally was the guy who wrote me into NAPP, he got a study on falls prevention. And he had then rung the national line and then diverted locally, and really made us think about how a PPG can carry an important subject forward in the new structures of the NHS and local government. There was another one on carers, who had a big problem in society, a big need, and worrying figures that the practice didn't record a large number of them, and how to help improve the standards of that. A question about the role of volunteers, which is back to the legal status, and where I hope NAPP may be able to help. More calls for health and well-being from some of the later speakers. And a plea to use the family and friends test, which is available in every health service institution, and a colleague who pointed out only needs 70 of those to get a statistically significant result, and it's available to all of us in all our surgeries. And a colleague of mine from Exeter, from another PPG very close to my home, another plea for more health and well-being and getting upstream in the challenge. Another problem for the CQC to consider more the consequences of what happens to other practices when they close one, because suddenly there are 1,000 or more, 10,000 in some case, patients suddenly stuck and needing a doctor. And then lastly, from Dorset, we had this yet another health and well-being with a practical example this time of the document My Life, My Care, etc., which is available on the website. Not all of you would have been able to get into Dr. Graham Easton, who is a GP teacher at Imperial College London. He broke new ground for us today. because he opened up the process of the consultation with a junior doctor in training, and he put the video up with her consent and the patient. And then he put up the teacher, the trainer, the GP trainer teaching her on the consultation, and then he threw it open to a patient group, as far as I know, for the first time ever. And I think that has quite profound implications because this is a standard teaching technique in about 40–50% of general practices. It opens a really interesting possibility of major patient input by commenting from a patient perspective on these consultations. And lo and behold, we have in our president an author of a document several years ago in the BMJ proposing more or less that. So I think this was a big breakthrough. He didn't have enough time, in my view, to explore all the ins and outs, but I hope that each of us who are interested in teaching particularly would think about how much patients can contribute to the education of what we want, which is patient-centred GPs in the future. Now, I just want to comment a little, because you had on the platform two professors of general practice. Both are fairly senior. Both of us have written a fair amount. Both of us have held national offices. And both of us are drawing opposite conclusions from the same facts. So it's, I think, a beautiful example for you of the metaphor that people can see the world through a glass that's half full or a glass that's half empty. And I think Professor Hungin gave us a really powerful and elegant talk about a glass that's half empty and maybe going to empty. And he systematically deployed a number of facts, none of which I dispute, but which left, as I said earlier, at least three of you, and I suspect more, looking at you as I was sitting watching you, somewhat depressed. And so where's the difference? What's it all about? One of the key differences is continuity of care. He pointed out that it's been lost in parts of England, and that's perfectly true. He's pointed out it's falling, and that's true too. But there is another side to this story. And the side is that the research on it has simply never been as strong. And to rush through for you, because my team in Exeter have done a 5,000-word review of continuity of care published last October. I can't copy that to you, it's copyright, but what we could do is give you a link to the internet link, and you can all read it if you're interested, but it's a bit long. But in summary, there are a whole string of benefits for patients from continuity of care. Benefits in terms of patient satisfaction, absolutely clear-cut. More following of medical advice, clear-cut. Much more uptake of personal preventive medicine in all forms, inside the practice and outside. Much less use of accident and emergency departments. Much less use of hospital admissions. And finally now, and the newest, lower mortality. So whichever way you cut that cake, it seems to me the research is clearly that as patients we want it. And the sort of story is that, in fact, there's a paper in the BMJ this year, Barker et al., which shows a 12.5% reduction in hospital admissions for NHS GPs who get, NHS patients who get to see the doctor of their choice against NHS patients who see some other GP. 12.5% is huge. And of course that sort of pressure will, I think, eventually lead government to rethink an issue that they've never taken very much importance in. So I have to point out, as one professor teasing another, that if he's supporting Berwick's Era 3 listen to the patient, it's not logical to take a view that personal listening is going to deteriorate or should deteriorate. And I think the future is Berwick, Era 3, listen more to patients, and I think continuity of care is one of the very best ways of doing that. And I think it's going to change optimistically for two quite different reasons. First, it's going to change because the weight of research is overwhelming. And it's, however much government ignore it, however much the profession ignores it, sooner or later that weight of evidence will force a system that gives more continuity. And secondly, there's an absolutely striking fact, which is you and what you want. Every survey shows that something like 2/3 of British patients want to have a choice of doctor and have a GP they prefer to see. And I don't think putting that with the research that it will be very easy to produce a system where you never ever see the doctor you want to see, and you are rotated through a series of strangers, which is beginning to happen already. And I know that in the gloom of his presentation, it wasn't easy to give some really optimistic pointers to real change in the future. I will offer you two. The first is there is an extraordinary fact that British undergraduate medical schools do not teach the principles of general practice. You can go right through 5 years qualifying as a doctor in Britain, and nobody in most medical schools will ever teach you the 20 core principles that make general practice different. It's extraordinary. And I've written another article drawing attention to this and listing those 20. But the really good news is that this has been twigged by the Health Select Committee of Parliament. Dr. Sarah Wollaston is the chairman, and they have issued a clear directive to medical schools that general practice should be taught as a subject. That hasn't happened yet. I think it's going to happen quite soon. My own medical school is already discussing it. When it happens, this huge recruitment problem that Professor Hungin rightly spoke about will, I think, be reduced, because the latest statistic is that 80% of medical students are turned off general practice. 80% of medical students, after completing UK training, say they don't want to do general practice. And that, I believe, is because they have never been told just how interesting, how important, and how fascinating, with the best human professional relationships in Britain, they haven't got that message yet. I'm an optimist. I'm a glass half full man, and I think when they get that message, it'll get better. And lastly, I just want to throw into the pot, they just talk about locums, which are sort of flickered through the conversation in the talks and in some of the discussions. We need to be clearer as patients about locums. More and more hospitals are using locums, more and more practices are using locums, and we haven't really thought it through. The best statement on locums is said by a patient leader at a conference of the Royal College of General Practitioners about 15 years ago, Claire Rayner, and she simply said, "God preserve us from your locums." And that was a cry from the patient. And there are very good reasons for thinking this out clearly, because if you're a doctor in a highly technical specialty, like, for example, histopathology, where the skill is looking at a slide down a microscope and deciding whether or not it's, say, cancer. If the regular histopathologist is away and a good, competent deputy locum comes in, there isn't much difference. The skill is in the doctor's mind being able to judge the slide. But a locum in general practice is completely different, because the skills of general practice are getting to know the patient, understanding the ideas, concerns and expectations, as Dr. Eaton said, and understanding the context in which this patient's life is being lived. Era 3, Berwick. So a locum coming into general practice is quite different from a consultant locum coming into a histopathology department. And it's very bad news for us. Claire Rayner had it right. Because these doctors have got a 4-hour, 8-hour framework. I'm home at 6. I'm out at lunch. There is no commitment to us, and there is no commitment to the practice. This is a short-term stopgap to hold the fort. And I think patients and patient participants must be said very carefully, and they're more expensive. They actually can cost more than the regular doctors. And I think we must be much clearer that this is not the way forward. And there are all sorts of reasons why that's happened, but there's a lot that a patient voice can do to say this is a bad trend and we want to reverse it. Whether or not hospitals do is not the concern of this conference, but in general practice, this is absolutely fundamental. So can I thank the President and the trustees for giving me the chance to be with you today. I always find this conference stimulating. I always learn, and I've certainly learned quite a lot today. I'd like to thank, on your behalf, all the speakers. I think both of them really made us think this morning, and I think subsequently in the other speakers we've had, and this stimulating prize demonstration we've just heard from both of them, we've learned a great deal. I think we should all thank the President and the trustees, because we must remember, although this is a big conference, this show, this charity, is run through volunteers. They're all unpaid, they're all doing it in their private time. It's a relatively small charity with a relatively large responsibility. And our job here, and I'm not a trustee, I never have been, but I'm a huge supporter, our job is to support NAPP in every way we can, including getting lots of other people and PPGs to join. The whole of this show today depends on that trustee group, and we need to preserve and realise how precious they are and support them. And lastly, I'd just like to finish by saying this is a national conference. There are people here who've come from all parts of England and a wide variety, and many of you have travelled very considerable distances to be here. That's what made the discussion so lively. That's what made the soapbox such fun and so thought-provoking. So thank you all very much indeed.
Such an inspiring summing up. Doesn't need anything more from me, but I would like to thank Sir Denis. As I said at the beginning of the conference, he offers enormous support to the trustees and to me personally, and that helps to keep going. He gives me academic inspiration so I can go out and nobble people and say, come on, you need to do this. And even the health secretary. So I now know what to say. You are marvellous, all of you, and you give me and all of us inspiration. Have a safe journey home. There is an AGM now, and for those who are NAPP members and wish to remain, we would very much like to see you. But thank you for coming, and until the next time. We don't know where we're yet going to be, but it will be somewhere in the UK, I hope. Thank you all very much indeed.